Hi everyone, my name is Margaux and welcome back to Media Women Worldwide. This year is the silver anniversary of the Provincetown International Film Festival, 25 years of artistry and filmmaking. There were tons of filmmakers and audiences who were enjoying this great program. I had the joy of taking in lots of Q&As with the filmmakers themselves, so come take a look.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an amazing day. I've been looking forward to this day for almost 2 years now. It was actually 2 years ago this week that the incident with the whale occurred. And I just want to say that there is no better place than being right here than I can imagine showing the first public screening of this film. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you to Lisa Viola, who has been a champion of many of my previous films, for being willing to accept this film at a very late date. I am very grateful for a lot of things. I should start by saying I'm really grateful to the humpback whale for letting Michael go. I'm really grateful to Josiah Mayo for scooping him up from the water. And I am incredibly grateful to Michael, to Josiah, to all of the Packards, to all of the Mayos who let me into their lives and who were trusting enough to share their stories with me in such a deep and powerful way. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I am also grateful to so many of the friends who have come out, so many of the people who are here who helped me make this film. I'm thinking about Lise King, who taught me how to fly a drone for this film. I will get into more thank yous later, but I will keep it short and say I look forward to answering questions afterward. Thank you all for coming.
So I'm going to open up to audience in just a moment, but I just am curious. I mean, this story obviously made headlines around the world. How is it that you were able to catch the story?
Catch the story, a good one. Well, before I answer that question, I just want to say again how deeply thankful I am to Michael Packard and the whole Packard family for allowing me into their lives. And I would just like Michael and Julie and Anne and Cynthia and Susan, please stand up. So the answer to that question is twofold. First, I just finished another film, and when I heard about this incident, it of course triggered the things that I was incredibly interested in as a reporter for the Boston Globe. I cover climate change and the marine environment, and my past films were about, one was called Lobster War, it was all about the lobster industry, and the other was called Entangled, and it was all about North Atlantic right whales. And when I heard about the collision of a lobster diver and a whale, I immediately was interested. And then the editor-in-chief of the Boston Globe assigned me to cover the story after it had already been out all over the world. But he was incredibly skeptical that this story was true. And so I had the very difficult task of trying to debunk it. That was my assignment, essentially. And so I did what any reporter worth his salt would do. I called Michael's mom. I spoke to the guy who scooped him out of the water. I spoke to Michael. I spoke to a bunch of other people. I got the 911 tapes, and then I had to skulk back to the editor of the Globe and tell him, I'm sorry, but I think I buy this story. I think it's true. And Michael has heard me tell this story already, but I would say the best headline to accompany a story I've ever written for the Globe accompanied the story that was on the front page of the paper about Michael's experience, and it was, "This fish story isn't hard to swallow." But the second answer to that question is that the only reason I probably came really to be able to make this film is because of Josiah Mayo, and actually really Stormy Mayo. And Stormy, who is here, say hi everybody. Stormy was one of the main characters in my last film, Entangled, and I got to know Josiah in the filming of that. And when I heard about this, I immediately started texting with Josiah. And if it was anyone else, I probably would have thought, this is definitely bullshit. And when I heard it from Josiah, I really trusted that this was the real deal. And then Josiah invited me, I think he probably had to prod Michael, who was by then incredibly sick of all of the attention. And the last thing he probably wanted was some dude with, coming along in his holy place on the water. And Josiah, I remember telling me the first time I went out, why don't you not bring a camera on this first, just smooth the path. And I said to Josiah, if I'm going out for 8 hours on a boat, I am definitely bringing my camera. And for some reason, Michael trusted me, even though I was probably incredibly annoying to him throughout that entire trip, sticking a camera in his face wherever he went. And so I, again, a lot of people were chasing Michael, hoping to tell his story, and for some reason, he agreed to allow me, and for that, I'm supremely thankful.
Thank you. I want to open it right away to audience questions, if there are any. While you're thinking of a question, I am curious, when you set out to make it, obviously you told the story of, your initial skeptical, not sure this was a true story until you became a believer, and you make a great case in the film, and I absolutely believe this is exactly what happened. But when you were making the film, was there ever a point where you thought, it might go a different way, that you thought the story you were setting out to tell might turn into something else?
Well, I think when you start out on a story, you never know exactly where it's going to go, and I never had the doubt or question that it might lead to me discovering Michael was making it all up. That was never really on my mind from the beginning of this. I just wanted to be able to spend enough time and go through the seasons with Michael to really get a sense of how to tell his story and what his story ultimately was about. And a lot of people have asked me that question. I've grappled with, well, what is this story ultimately about? And I said this in a radio interview yesterday, but ultimately, and one of the reasons why we ended the film as we did with Michael and Julie dancing to Led Zeppelin's "If the Sun Refused to Shine, I'd Still Be Loving You," which is their wedding song. I really came to see this as a love story. A story about a man who loves the sea, a man who loves to be in the sea, a man who loves his family and whose love carried him through that incredibly harrowing experience of being in the whale, but also carried him through and continues to carry him through his depression and the other meaning of being in the whale.
Because you obviously spent a lot of time here filming. What did you learn about Provincetown that you didn't know before?
I love this place. You know, the first time I was in Provincetown many years ago, I used to cover homelessness. And I remember writing a story. I knew this was a really intriguing, idiosyncratic place. And I wrote a story about these guys who used to sleep under rowboats on the beach in Provincetown. And it was just this really interesting bunch of characters. And then I wrote a story about the guy, the late police officer who used to direct traffic and danced. Who remembers his name? What is it? Thomas?
Donald Thomas.
But I guess I should also thank the pandemic in some ways for being able to make this film, because I have the greatest cousin in the history of cousins. She has this really amazing house in Eastham, and I have 2 young kids, and at the start of the pandemic, we thought we were going to kill each other because we live in a 2-bedroom condo in Boston, and it started to get very crowded very quickly. And so we called my cousin, and I asked her if we might be able to stay for a weekend just to get a breather at her place. And she said, sure. But then the lockdown and the travel ban started, and she said, well, you could just stay there until we come back. It turned out that she didn't come back for months. And so we got to experience the Outer Cape, and I got to spend all this time with Michael. And so I'm extremely grateful, and this is just, you know, it's I don't know, this is maybe not the right expression, but like shooting fish in a barrel. It's so beautiful here, and it's so hard not to capture the intense beauty of this place. I don't know if I've answered your question, but...
Question in the back? Yes.
This is obviously like a very long and difficult shoot. What was the hardest part, either technically or emotionally, for you to make, for both of you, actually?
So, I was going to say this is a hard question, but it's actually an easy question. So I had to do something I've never done before, which was film underwater. And that alone is challenging, but I had to do that knowing that there are great white sharks prowling these waters, and all you have to do is open the Sharktivity app, and you see shark, 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 shark. And so Michael, you know, he's of another breed. I fear. And so going in the water to film him was a frightening experience, and I gave my kids very tight hugs before I left that morning, and I was just, you know, incredibly, and you never know technically how it's going to turn out until you surface, and so I was incredibly grateful that the footage actually came out.
Yes.
So I'm glad you didn't do this, but I'm wondering, you said it's a work in progress. Have you been pressured by anybody to do reenactments?
Question?
It's a great question. Not yet, and I have a deep problem with reenactments. I would just say that there are 2 scenes in which we don't reenact, but we illustrate. And we, as we were cutting the scenes about Michael's experience nearly drowning when he was 12 or 14, and the experience of his plane crash, I was very mindful and worried about that line. I didn't want anything to look like reenactment, I wanted it to look like illustration. And I have a distinct definition in my mind about the difference between those. I don't know if viewers have that same distinction, but I made, my first film was about the Boston Marathon bombings, which is a long story, but in short, I gave my footage to, some of my footage to Nat Geo or someone, and they used my footage to create reenactments of the bombings, and that was the most awful thing I had ever seen, and I would hope to never, ever have to do anything like that in my making of a film.
Don't sway under pressure.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Michael is a man before his time. You especially wrote this.
So this is the esteemed Michael Moore. He is next to Stormy Mayo, perhaps the most famous North Atlantic right whale scientist. He was also in my film. I'm so happy to see you here. And you are absolutely right. Nobody else would make that link, but we almost included that. I don't know if you caught that, Michael, but you are, so in my last film was all about the impact of the lobster industry on the North Atlantic right whale, whose population has plummeted by about 30% over the last 10 years. And the problem mainly is the lines, the vertical buoy lines that stretch from the surface to the sea floor that most lobster fishermen use. Michael, of course, is the most whale-safe fisherman there is. He's not using rope. So if we could all grow up to be like Michael Packard, as his wholesaler says in the film, you know, the whale might be in a better place. Go ahead, Michael.
I just want to be in defense of my fellow lobstermen. All those right whale deaths weren't from their lobster marks. A great majority of them are from boat collision with the whale. I want everybody to know.
This is not the direction that I foresaw this conversation going, but I would say that is absolutely true. I endorse that. And there's another lobster fisherman here, Rob Martin. There he is. He's also in Entangled, and he is a commercial lobsterman who uses lobster lines, but he is also at the vanguard of lobstermen who are trying to find ways to protect North Atlantic right whales, and he has been leading the way experimenting with ropeless fishing gear. But this is the subject of my last film, so we don't need to go.
And unfortunately, that's where we have to stop. We have another screening coming in a few minutes.
Thank you all so much.
For more information, you can check out ptownfilm.org or MediaWomenWorldwide.com for all of the coverage of this year's festival. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll see the next one.